Okay. So just a bunch of graphs, just to establish a few stylized facts, hoping that panels beyond this can discuss some of these, what are emerging as macro level facts for the state. First, a few pieces of information from the NSS. Sajita had already presented some information from the NSS. This is a 2017-18 education-focused national survey, a fairly large sample from Kerala as well. This graph just shows for each of the classes from 2 to 10, each bar is a class, the shares of students in that class who are in Malayalam, English, and other mediums. You can see other mediums in green, very minimal. So overwhelmingly, it's either English or Malayalam. And you can see that for across all the grades, all the classes, there's a substantial number of students studying in English medium. This is a little different from the data that she presented because that was by schools, and schools having English and Malayalam first and second. This is actual representative sample of students. Okay, so it's consistent with what was presented earlier. We have in many classes a majority of students now studying in English medium. Okay, first stylized fact. Second is all India also now increasingly there is a lot of English medium instruction. So this is just showing where Kerala stands relative to the rest of India. Of course, a far more percentage of English medium students in Kerala, but you can see that all India as well, it's now over 20%, right? So these are larger trends in the country, but for some of the reasons that Sajita had mentioned from the 1990s, the acceleration in Kerala is very clear, okay? So 40, 50, 60% of students in Kerala are now in English medium. All India, it's around 20%. Now, there are three types of schooling providers, as was mentioned: government, private aided, and private unaided. So this is just breaking up. Again, each of the bars is a class 2 to 10. Now breaking up the Malayalam and English by type of provider. Okay, so you can see that largely Malayalam medium students studying in Malayalam medium are studying in government schools, the blue at the bottom. And we can see that students studying in English, some of them, a lot of them are in unaided schools, but a fair number of them are in aided as well as in government schools. So if you look at the top three bars, those are the ones studying in English across three different types of providers. So the pink is English medium unaided. The gray from the top is English medium in aided schools, and the orange is English medium in government schools. Right. So the bottom three are Malayalam, and you can see that for Malayalam, it's largely government schools and to some extent aided schools. Right, very, very few unaided schools now offering Malayalam medium to students. Okay, now I'm going to move to a discussion of proficiency. The only somewhat credible source we have is data from the ASER report, Annual Status of Education Report. And I'm very aware that among many educationists, there are ASER, many people have issues with ASER data. Nevertheless, this seems to be the only available data regarding reading proficiency. So I'm going to present ASER data, and we should have a discussion on what sense to make of it. So here I'm just sticking with some stylized facts. Just a background to these data. It's meant to be a representative rural household survey. So it's only for rural India, therefore in our case, rural Kerala. It's a one-on-one assessment in the household, as opposed to a lot of testing, which is in the school. So there are surveyors who go to randomly selected households and administer the test one-on-one to students in those households. The tests are regarding basic reading and arithmetic. Here I'm focusing on basic reading. And it's representative. One of the things interesting about the ASER is that they offer the student or the child a test in either Malayalam or English. So for every state or every part of the country, they offer either English or the local language. Okay, I'll come back to this point. How many of the kids choose Malayalam and how many of them choose English? But the reading proficiency is marked at 5 reading levels. One of them, Professor Veeramani had mentioned, the ability to read a standard 2 text. The second is ability to read a standard 1 text, but not beyond. Third is ability to read words, but not a standard 1 text. Fourth is just letters, but not words. And fifth is no reading ability whatsoever. Okay, so there's a 5, you could say fairly crude, but fairly straightforward categories. And ASER's own assumption is that by the end of standard 2, students are expected to read a simple text fluently, what they call grade level. And so ASER's own expectation, as laid out in policy, is the kind of text that they present as class 2 text ought to be read by a student at the beginning of class 3, having finished class 2. Okay, so here are the basic data. Let's first look at the graph on the left, which is for Kerala. I've just focused on classes or standards 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And each of the colors shows reading ability, percentage of students in that class with reading ability from nothing to letters to words to standard 1 text to standard 2 text. Standard 2 text is the gray on top. Okay, so we could interpret it in different ways. I'm still focusing on the graph on the left, Kerala. You could say that for class 2 students, a fair number, a small minority only can read class 2 text, which is the gray. The gray increases as you go up to class 3, 4, 5. So by the time you're in class 5, a fair number of students now can read class 2 text. But as Professor Veeramani pointed out, something like 30+% of kids still are unable to read a class 2 text in class 5. Okay. To put it in context, I've put the All India figures on the right, because ASER is an All India. Remember, this is rural alone. You can see if you just track the gray, which is the color on top, you can see that All India, the grays are shorter compared to Kerala. So relative to the rest of India, reading proficiency in Kerala. I also want to mention this is not a comprehension test. This is merely the ability to recognize letters, words, and read fluently. It's not comprehension. The bar, which is one of the many kind of criticisms of this, the bar is very low. Right? This is a very low bar that on the basis of which we are gauging ability here. But Kerala seems to be doing better on this very low bar compared to the rest of India. But I guess the real the very disturbing fact, stylized fact, is that in Kerala, a substantial number of kids cannot even read, right? Forget comprehension, cannot read a class 2 text even when they're in class 5, 6, and so on. Okay. Along with some states like Himachal, Kerala is among the best performers relative to other states in the All India. So All India figures are even more disturbing. Be that as it may, in absolute terms, very disturbing for Kerala. Asar, since it's they do this every 2 years, we can actually trace over time how reading proficiency has gone, and you can see that reading proficiency has not increased dramatically. So here I'm just focusing on reading of class 2 text. Okay. The black line is class 5 kids over time. The blue line is class 3 kids over time. Okay. So if you focus on class 5 kids being able to read a class 2 text, that number has increased a little bit from 60 to 70 to close to 80. And then after COVID, it actually fell. So this has been remarked across different parts of the country, that there has been a fall in learning outcomes. There was no ASR in 2020, the COVID year. So I'm going to now focus on 2018 data, because it does look like the 2022 data suggests that we are still recovering perhaps from the COVID effect. Yeah. So we're going to focus on unpacking the last year for which there is some kind of stable data, which is 2018, okay, proficiency. Okay, first is reading proficiency by Malayalam versus English medium of education. Okay, so again, on the horizontal axis, is classes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The red line is Malayalam, the blue line is English. You can see that after class 2, that is to say from class 3 onwards, the English line is several percentage points, 10 to 20 percentage points above the red line. That is to say, reading proficiency of kids in English medium is a fair bit higher, and it's all statistically significant, the differences. That's one stylized fact. Okay, so not only has there been this movement, as Sajita mentioned, to English, but kids in English are seem to be able to read more fluently. How about by school type? So among the 3 kinds of schooling providers, government, aided and unaided, unfortunately, ASR does not have data for aided. It's something that we've now pointed out to ASR. So I'm here focusing, this is still representative data. They actually have data for aided, but they actually don't have test data for aided. It's a gap in the ASR. So I'm here focusing on the other 2 categories, government as well and private unaided. So you can see again, the blue is the private unaided. Here the red is government. So there is a reading proficiency gap where kids in private unaided are able to read 10 to 15 percentage points more compared to kids in government schools. Okay. So now I'm just using the standard 2 fluency, okay, not the other indicators. So all these graphs are now showing the percentage of kids who can read a standard 2 text. Now we can intersect language and schooling provider, right? So we already saw a stylized fact that kids in English medium have greater proficiency than Malayalam medium. We saw that kids in unaided schools have greater proficiency than government schools. And now we can look at the intersections. Since there are very few kids in Malayalam medium unaided schools, I've taken that out. So there are only 3 categories left. What is interesting, so the black line is English unaided, and the blue line is English government. Okay, there is not too much difference between the black and blue lines. Okay, so whether you're across different classes, kids who are studying English, whether it's in unaided private school or in government school, their reading proficiency is not very different. Even if there's a gap, in most cases, it's not statistically significant. What is the graph, the line which is lower is the red line, which is Malayalam government. Okay, so that is so one implication of this is that while there is a difference between proficiency between unaided and government, and between English and Malayalam, what is really driving this is the English Malayalam. So that kids in English medium, in government and unaided, are not significantly different. Okay, as a stylized fact. All of this needs explanation, no doubt. The other very important, you could say, gap in reading proficiency is the gender gap. So we have binary gender here, boys, girls, that Asar looks at. The blue line is girls, the red line is boys, and there is a clear statistically significant gap where girls' reading proficiency is more than boys. Okay. Now the final thing to do is to intersect gender with language and schooling provider. Okay. So this is slightly more complicated. I'm just putting all those things into one graph. Okay. So as the legend says, so we have Malayalam medium government boys, Malayalam medium government girls, English government boys, English government girls, English private, that is unaided boys, English unaided girls, right? Aided schools are out because of the way Asar is collecting this stuff. There are many ways to read this. But one thing I want to call your attention to, when you put many lines on a graph, can be a little confusing. One thing to draw your attention to is if you look at, for example, class 5. Yeah. Among these 6 different categories, right? Just focus on class 5. Among the 6 different categories, what stands out is the red dotted line, right? All the other ones are kind of squeezed a little together. And many of them are not even statistically significantly different, right? What stands out, not just in class 5, even if you look at class 4, but especially class 5 is very clear, which is basically Malayalam medium government school boys. Okay, so beyond a point, this kind of analysis, can't be stretched, and this is the limit of what I'll take it to, which is just to show that across grades, right, that it seems to be that boys in Malayalam medium government schools are lagging behind, right? So the girls in the same schools, which is the solid red line, are kind of with the rest, right? So those among you who are educators, who know Kerala schooling a lot better than I do, to the extent, and yes, there are larger issues of, the data and so on, but I think it is picking up something. So the question really, and this question also can be validated, Asar is not the only way to look at it, but it looks like there is now a particular category that we need to look at. What's happening to boys in Malayalam medium government schools? And I guess stereotypes come to mind when we put it like that. But I think this needs, because in the same schools, on average, the girls are doing okay, right? So, yeah, okay. So, in fact, my very last slide. The other interesting thing, which I think only Asar can do because of the way in which it's done, is, remember I mentioned that Asar gives, it's house to house, right? They go to selected households and they administer the test one-on-one, and they give the choice, right? Malayalam in Kerala, Malayalam or English, other states equivalent, and kids can choose. So here is the choice, and that can tell us something. Okay, so Malayalam. So here I'm on the heights of these graphs, these bars is only about what percentage of kids choose English. Okay, the rest therefore are choosing Malayalam. Okay, look at the blue bars, which are very low. These are Malayalam medium government schools. Most of these kids are choosing Malayalam, right? To take the test in Malayalam. Not surprising, right? It's less than 10% of kids are choosing English. Okay. Now look at the other two. The red and the green are English medium schools, right? Look at the red. A large percentage of English medium government school kids are choosing to take the test in Malayalam, right? So the red ones across the grades, remember each set is class 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 40%, 30%, 40%. It gets to 50, 60% only by class 9 and 10, right? For most classes, a majority of English medium government school kids, when given the choice, are choosing to take the proficiency test in Malayalam as a stylized fact. I think this, we need to now make sense of this. One way to think about it is they are still more comfortable, right? Maybe there's anxiety. When given the choice, they're more comfortable in taking the test. Now, what about English unaided, which is green? Even for English unaided, look at the heights. I put it all the way to 100 just to show you that it's far, the bars are far from 100. If you look at the green bars from the left, it's 60, 60, 60, 50, right? That is to say, it's not an overwhelming majority of even unaided, that is private English medium schools who are choosing to take the test in English. It's a little more in the smaller classes, and I think that particularly picks up slightly posher kinds of schools. So what Sajita was referring to before many of these kids make their way to other kinds of schools. But 40 to 50% of English medium kids, even in private schools, when given the choice, seem to be taking the test in Malayalam. Right. So I think, of course, let me end it by just saying that this is only stylized facts, and the data sets can be critiqued. But I think it points to certain things for which we need more robust understanding, qualitative and quantitative. But Sajita didn't use the term disturbing, but I think it if you put it together, there is a disturbing kind of reality where everything is moving to English, but clearly proficiency is poor and kids seem uncomfortable, right? And so I think we need to now probe what's happening behind this. But yeah, thank you.